right, James. Last week, you were excited to hear the intro. And to those listening, it might have seemed like you heard the intro, but you did not.
I did not, no.
So, here's the new intro.
You can smell that like 5 feet above the glass.
I like this at least twice as well.
I smell metal and grease.
Nobody should be putting this stuff in their body.
Tell me about your childhood, James.
Rabbits are like slippers. Paul has to push the microphone away.
To be honest, I don't really know the difference between Ohio
it's
and
the same
Wisconsin.
thing. What am I dealing with? That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
I like that nobody should be putting this in their bodies.
Yep.
That's probably accurate. Yeah, because that was the
27-year-old light whiskey.
Yeah, that was the 160 proof whiskey.
Yep. Yeah. No, that was it was really fun making that intro.
Yeah,
actually.
I imagine. I've been waiting until we had enough audio that we could do that because I want to preserve all the dumb things that we say. Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about J. Henry, James. Let me just guess.
Okay.
Without knowing anything, I'm going to guess that this is from Wisconsin.
You are correct.
Oh my God.
Yes, you are right. But as we know, you don't know the difference between Wisconsin and Ohio. So let's just say it's in the Midwest.
Yeah, that Ohio was my second guess.
It is. It's from Dane, Wisconsin, which is just outside of Madison. And they've been producing bourbon since 2008. But they did it right. They did not release anything until it was at a 5-year age statement. So as far as I know, they didn't have any product available until 2013, 2014 range.
They didn't release any like 3-year or...
Nope.
Wow.
They waited till 5 years.
That's impressive.
And it was nice because they have a working farm that's been there since the 1940s, I think. So now if you go there, the tasting room is the original farmhouse that was on the property. And when the current, when Joe... Well, it's always confusing because there's Joe and then there's Joe Z. So Joe is the dad, Joe Z is the son. When Joe took over the farm, he had this idea of bringing in some extra money through whiskey. So they went and they traveled around Kentucky and they learned, everything about whiskey because they grow corn, rye, and wheat on site. So they knew they could pretty much do an estate bourbon. They would have to probably source the malt, which they do, the malted barley. But everything else is grown there. And so this became another way for them to bring in money. But since it was a working farm, they already had money coming in. So they didn't have to do what a lot of other small distilleries do, which is release stuff before it's ready.
That was going to be my question, is how could they afford to wait until 5 years down the road?
Yep.
Because generally with a distillery and, you have some sort of angel investor or group of investors who are like, we'll give you the $5 million that it takes to start this, but they're not going to be willing to wait 6 years or 5 years to get any sort of return. They're going to want you to start selling something 2 or 3 years in. And that's why most distilleries also make vodka and rum and gin, because they need to start creating something to pay that back right away. And so I think that's really cool that because they were already a farm, it gave them the flexibility to say, well, we're doing this as a passion project. We want to do it right the first time.
Yeah, and there was, as far as I know from all of my discussions with Joe and Josie, there was never any discussion of releasing clear spirits. So the idea of doing a vodka or a gin, I'm sure they talked about it at some point, but it never really was a true option. Same way with releasing young whiskey. I think they really wanted to stick to this idea of producing a quality product and releasing it when it was ready. And a lot of people don't know, but Wisconsin has really extreme temperature fluctuations. So the winter is extremely cold, the summers get pretty hot, and the product ages relatively quickly. And so at 5 years, I think it's almost perfect. We can talk about it a little bit more as we go through. But one of the unique aspects of this too is it's a 4-grain bourbon. So it's corn, wheat, rye, and then malted barley. Like I said, the corn, the wheat, the rye all come from that farm. And the corn is an heirloom variety of red corn that was, I think, created by the University of Wisconsin in like 1939. And then Josie's grandfather grew it on the farm starting in the 1940s. And then it sort of just went away. Like nobody grew it anymore because everybody started to convert over to what we see now, all the yellow corn. And then they brought it back when they started to make the bourbon because they felt like it created such a unique flavor profile for the product.
Interesting.
So what we're drinking is going to be a 1930s heirloom variety of corn, and you can taste it. It has a very different profile than what you're used to with yellow corn.
So which one should we start with?
So let's start with the 5 year. So they do a small batch version of this that's 5 years that it's a lower proof. I don't have any of it. I think it's 90 something proof. So this is, to me, what is considered their baseline product. So this is 5 years. What's the proof on that?
That's a good.
That's a pretty good one.
It is 59.95.
Okay. So 59.95 at 5 years.
Now, right away, I got to say, I really like the bottle design that they went with here. That's probably loud. One, it's a very comfortable bottle to grab. And it's got the metal foil wrap on the cork top. Just looks classy, James.
It's a really nice bottle. And that's one of the, it's funny because now I'm sort of spending a lot of time looking at labels and bottles and stuff like that. And I've always really liked it. I like the way they do it. It looks like the quality matches the bottle.
Right. And
I think that's something that people overlook.
That smells good.
Yeah, it has. I think what I like about this the most, and so a little bit of history about me with J. Henry. I first went there in 2015, 2016. And at the time, craft distilleries were not nearly as prominent as they are now. I couldn't find a whole lot of craft products. And if I did, they were just independent people that were putting, they were taking MGP, putting a label on it and saying they were a craft distillery. And so this was one of the first ones I tried where it was distinctive for a good reason. We've had some on here that are distinctive for bad reasons. But this is the first one I tried where I was like, damn, that's a really good product. I immediately called them, got samples, wrote some reviews for Bourbon Sippers, and since then I've gone back every single year.
Wow. Now, you're not going to Wisconsin just to go to J. Henry.
No, we have family in Wisconsin.
Sure to go.
Yeah, we have family in Wisconsin. But whenever I'm back there, I go. It's a great farm. It's really scenic. And they always have different products, which the last one we're going to try today is one of their finished products. But they've always stuck to bourbon. That's it. So they decided they wanted to do bourbon. They were going to be really good at bourbon. And that's what they do. They do some blends, they do some barrel finishes, but everything is bourbon.
But all of these are using corn, wheat, and rye, right?
They're all 4 grain.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I guess 4 grain is starting to become a little more common, specifically in craft products, but it's still not your run-of-the-mill mash bill. Even the red corn withstanding, having the wheat and the rye together. And to me, 4 grain bourbons always have this slight funk to them.
Oh yeah, the wheat definitely brings in a little bit of the funk.
Because I feel like wheat is a mellower grain than rye if it's used as just a wheated bourbon. But when you kind of mix them together, it makes it feel more of like a farm style kind of whiskey to me.
I think they balance each other out pretty well. You get a little bit of spice in here. You can get a little bit of the rye. You get a little bit of earthiness and kind of that funkiness from the wheat. And the corn, which I think the corn is really what makes this product unique. Because it's sweet, but it's not sweet in the way that yellow corn is.
Right.
It's got more of almost like a nutty, earthy quality to it that's just different than regular corn. And so for me, I get more like grassy notes. There's always like a little bit of a mint hint underneath it that I think is really interesting.
It's a little nutty.
It's a little nutty. Yeah, Andrew will like that. It's a little nutty. But I think it's almost perfect at 5 years because you can taste the grain, but it's not overly so. It doesn't taste like a young bourbon. And you can taste the barrel, but it's not overly so. It doesn't taste over oaked. And so it just comes off as really well balanced. And even at 120 proof, I think it's approachable.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next thing is typically for me, if you jump right into a 120 proof whiskey, because we haven't had any whiskey to warm up today.
There was no warm up.
If you jump right into a 120 proof whiskey, it kind of kicks you in the face a little bit. That first sip. This one didn't. Now, I do think the 5 years shows a little bit in the aroma. I think the aroma is slightly more ethanol pronounced because of the high proof and younger age, but on the palate, it just has a great flavor, and it is not like scalding your throat at all. So they are clearly using a good quality cut of the distillate, and I think that 4 grain, like you said, there's some of the mint there, there's some of the earthiness, a little bit of the funk, but it's incredibly well balanced while still being an interesting flavor profile.
Yeah, and I should point out too that when I was there last time visiting, I think Josie said something like, I think 5% of their barrels make it into this blend. So it's the 5-year cask strength. I forgot what. I think this one is, this is the Patton Road Reserve.
Okay.
So about 5% of their barrels make it into Patton Road Reserve. So they go through and they figure out the flavor profiles that they like, and they kick some aside for the Patton Road. So all of these are single barrel. So they do vary a little bit from barrel to barrel. But I'm to the point now where I could pick this blind out of 1,000 different whiskeys. Like, it just has a very distinctive quality to it. And what does vary is sometimes you get a little bit more mint. Sometimes you get a little bit more cinnamon. I'm getting more cinnamon in this as it sits. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that grassy note comes out a little bit more, but it's always pleasant. I haven't had a bottle of it yet that I don't like. The 5-year standard, if you want to give something different a shot, has a very similar flavor profile, but because of the added dilution, it is a lot lighter on the palate. And I don't think you get some of those underlying notes as much. You tend to get more of the sweeter aspect that comes out.
Yeah, I really like this. Is this available at all? I mean, outside of Wisconsin?
So right now, I think they have Wisconsin and like the greater Chicago area, but they're in a very good point if you're a small distillery, which is, I think they sell everything they make. And so that scaling up process for them is really what's happening next. But right now, that's the only sites that you can get it.
Okay. So this is very limited.
It's very limited, yeah. Okay. Some of the ones we're trying here are incredibly limited. Like, you had to go to the distillery to get it. I think there's a couple thousand bottles. But if you're in the Midwest, you can find the Patton Road Reserve at a lot of different liquor stores.
Yeah. This is really cool because it just goes to show that there are people that it's not a matter of their product not being great, that have limited distribution.
Yeah, I mean, distribution is always a challenge. If we ever get to a point where we can sell stuff and ship it online, I think that's going to be huge. And that's, I hope, is the next big push with spirits, because right now you can have a craft distillery, a craft brewery. You can have a winery and you can sell product online and ship it. You can't do that with spirits yet. And I think that really hurts a lot of these small producers, because it's going to be hard for them to get a decent sized chunk of the market when you're competing with folks like Maker's Mark and Buffalo Trace products that distributors know they're going to take, that they're going to make a lot of money out of. So it really ties their hands. And that's part of the reason why I love working with craft distilleries, because I think more people need to know how good craft whiskey can be. And I think this, along with Watershed, are really good examples of how well you can do craft whiskey.
Yeah. So I just poured, I should have asked if I was going in the right order, but I just poured the next one. And it is the Anniversary Blend Limited 2019 Edition Cask Strength, 63.3% ABV.
So this was the first.
That smells amazing.
Yeah. So what they decided to do,
cow.
As they got to their 10th anniversary, they decided they wanted to do Anniversary Blend. And so I happened to be there this year. I think they do it every year on Black Friday. And I happened to be there that year. So I stopped in and I grabbed a bottle. I had Joe Henry sign it for me because this was the first one they did. And at the time, I think this is a blend of like 5, 6, and 7 year bourbons, somewhere in that range. So they had a little bit older stock that they held back just for this. It's about 1% of their barrels go into these. Okay. So 5% into the Patton Road, about 1% into these. And it was such a a popular release. They only did it at the distillery. People lined up for it. They stood outside in the middle of winter in Wisconsin to get a bottle of it. And it was so popular, they brought it back for 20 and 21.
It's good. As a Floridian, though, nothing's getting me outside in winter in Wisconsin.
But for them, it's easy, right? Like,
I suppose.
I was there this year in November, and it's
okay.
You just stick on a coat and you go outside.
No. You don't just stick on a coat and go outside.
You do. You put on a coat, you put on a hat.
I just watched a movie, and as we all know, Hollywood movies are completely
100% accurate.
100%
always.
accurate. Mm-hmm. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it's called like Snow Hunter or something. It was a Sundance Snow
Piercer?
No, not Snow Piercer.
That's the only one I know.
No, it was Jeremy Renner and
I know what you're talking about. I've seen that. Yeah,
he's a hunter out in, I think it's Wisconsin or Utah or something.
Well, we know you don't know exactly.
No, it was
where Wisconsin
Wyoming.
is.
It was Wyoming.
Yeah. Okay. It started with a W. You were close.
Am I right in saying that Wyoming is right next to Wisconsin?
No.
Oh, okay. But they both border Canada, right? I think so.
Wyoming, I'm not sure about.
I'm gonna go with it. So
okay, I don't think Wisconsin does either, except by water.
Yeah, but Wyoming's really cold. Wisconsin's really cold. That's all I'm trying to get the point across.
That works.
But in this movie, there's literally like this person dies because they're running outside in the winter, and it's so cold. Wind River. Thanks, Tyler. That's the name of the movie, Wind River. They're running outside, and it's so cold that if you breathe too deeply too long, your lungs literally explode. Like the blood vessels pop from the cold air, and you drown in blood. Look that up and see if that's a real thing.
Look up where they're at too, because I've been in Wisconsin a lot. My lungs have yet to explode.
Yeah, but were you running outside in the winter?
But so let's say you go to the distillery. What are you going to do? Run to the distillery?
No, but I'm just
drive your car there and you're going to get out.
But
I think you'll survive it.
My point is that if it's cold enough that if you did run, you would die from drowning in blood.
Where did you grow up?
It's too cold to be anywhere.
Did you grow up here?
Yes.
How many times have you been like up north during the winter?
A lot.
How many's a lot? And where did you go?
Usually like Colorado, Washington, Montana.
Okay, so you're fine. You know what it's like in the winter.
Yeah, you stay inside.
Oh my God. All right.
It's not possible.
Unless you're snowboarding.
Yeah.
What? It's not possible?
I was going to say, I've been in Alaska running before.
It doesn't freeze your lungs. It's the blood vessels pop and then you drown in blood.
How does that happen?
I don't know. They talked about it in the movie. It sounded very real in the movie.
Obviously, it's probably real. I mean, if it's in the movie and it was Jeremy Renner, it's got to be 100% accurate.
I'm just saying, it wasn't like... It was a very grounded in reality film.
Okay, well, let's get back to the point here. The point is that people stood out in the cold for this.
Yeah.
Nobody's lungs exploded. As far as I know, blood vessels did not burst. And to me, it's worth standing out for. Like, I was really happy that I happened to get a bottle of this. And we'll compare it. So every year they've done one of these blends, they've added more older stock to it as they have more barrels that are sort of hanging around the rick house. But this was their first blend. But I think you'll see how the spirit has really evolved since 2019, because the 2021 version is entirely different to me.
So it's amazing. If you go back to the first one that we tried, which is just the 5-year bourbon, it tastes like straight up caramel.
Oh, really?
Like going back to it. I mean, it just smells like candy.
Yeah, it smells like maple and caramel to me on the nose now.
Yep. So, I think it shows immediately that these are probably a little older casks in the 2019 special edition cask strength.
It's definitely more on the like leathery oaky side of it. Yep. It's a more of a brash whiskey, I guess I would say. As soon as I tried this, I was like, I really want a cigar with this because it seems like it would hold up to that.
Yeah, this one's a little more like woodsy to me. Is, yeah. Like it's a little more rough around not rough around the edges, but it has a more mature character to it.
And so this is an interesting point too. I'll go ahead and bring it up here now that we're talking about this. I think we've talked about this before, how people automatically assume that older is better, right?
Yes.
So J. Henry came out with the 5-year, and I was a huge fan of the 5-year. I have some of my friends who are complete bourbon snobs. David, if you're listening, David, complete bourbon snob. But when I brought him back the 5-year, he loved it. And I kept asking him every time I go back, like, do you guys have some stock sitting back that you're just like waiting on? They're like, yeah, like we got some stuff. We want to do some 7 and 10 year. And so as soon as they came out with the 7, I lost my mind. I called everybody in Wisconsin that I know, had somebody find a bottle for me and keep it. And I smuggled it back over Christmas and drank some, and I had some with David. And it was good, but I liked the 5-year better. And I was kind of confused by that because I just assumed that it would get richer.
Better, right?
Yeah, that it would get richer, that there would be more caramely notes in it. I think the wood, just that little extra bit of wood covered over some of those like grainy or earthy notes that I think just made it really distinctive. And so what I found with J. Henry's products is that it peaks at about 5 to 6. And then you get a little bit of a fall off between like 7 and 8, where it's just not quite as good to me. But then once it gets above 8, it really starts to be outstanding again.
Yep.
And so they have this kind of bimodal thing with quality going on. And you see that a lot of times at small distilleries. So I guess my caution to people is don't just assume that it's going to be better because it's older. And don't just assume that if you try one at like 7 years and it's not quite as good, that it's not going to be better again as it gets older. There's something magical that happens in barrels, and it's unpredictable.
Yeah. So this was something that, so when my dad first started getting into Scotch, when I first started getting him into Scotch, he kind of asked me, he's like, why does every Scotch distillery bottle their whiskey at 12, 15, and 18 years? Like literally all of them. I mean, it's incredibly odd to get an 11-year whiskey or a 10-year whiskey or a 7-year-old whiskey. Like that. Those are all odd numbers. It's almost always like 12, 15, 18.
Unless it's a single barrel. Sometimes you'll get those just because it's, by chance.
But the standard bottling ages are 12, 15, 18, 21, 25, 30, 35, 40, I thought about that a lot. And early on, I was like, well, I guess that's just, everybody does it, so everybody does it. Like, what I noticed is between brands, now that I've had the opportunity to have a lot more whiskeys at different age points, I've noticed that with Scotch, a similar thing happens where the difference between, a 7 and 8-year-old whiskey is generally negligible. But there seems to be a pretty dramatic difference between an 8-year-old Scotch and a 12-year-old Scotch in terms of maturity. It seems like 8 to 9 years is kind of this point where it goes from tasting like a young whiskey to it like starts to flatline into a level of maturity. And then it kind of stays there. Like 12 to 15-year-old, the difference is generally pretty small. I don't really notice that much of a difference with a lot of distilleries. But once you get to 18, it's like now it ticks up back up again. So there's something about, and with Scotch, it's more variable, in a way too, because they're using second fill barrels. But there is something to those kind of standard age statements. There's a reason why a lot of bourbon is bottled between 6 and 8 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not a coincidence. It's something about, the level of char that you use, the climate that you're in is going to play a factor. So you're going to get these peaks and valleys as it ages.
Yeah. And I think, with bourbon, everything just gets compressed time-wise because you're using the new barrels, right? And so
the smell's completely different.
It does, yeah. So I think what happens a lot of times with bourbon is that, like you said, you'll extract stuff very quickly. And so you get this very rapid escalation of like the tannic quality of that smokiness, and then it starts to level off. And as it levels off, it mellows. And that's what I saw with theirs, is that the 7-year seemed almost more leathery and smoky to me than the 8 and 9, because the 8 and 9 mellowed out a bit. So moving on to this next one, this is the 2021 edition. So this is this year's. I didn't make it there in 2020 to get it because of the whole COVID situation, but I did go back this year and get this one. So this is only 1,500 bottles released. So this is bottle 385 of 1,500. It's 122 proof, and this includes some of their older stock now. So everything from 5 to probably 10 years is included in this blend. So I thought it would be an interesting comparison because, one, you get to see them improving, I think, as blenders from 2019 to 2021, but also getting some of that additional older stock to give it a little bit more body.
To me, this makes the 2019 taste basic.
It makes it taste grainy to me.
Like the 2019 is a great whiskey on its own, but compared directly side by side to this, it's missing all this pizzazz and sparkle.
And sparkle?
And sparkle.
Yeah. The 2021.
That's my new tasting note for 2022.
Sparkle?
Sparkly whiskeys. That's what I want. That's what I want in my life is more sparkle.
Well, I'm glad I could provide sparkle. I think the 2021 is a much more nuanced whiskey. It's complete. It's well balanced. It's got a little bit of oak to it, but it still retains that sort of bright quality that I really enjoy with the 5-year. It is just stellar, in my opinion. So when I tried this, I was like, give me 2 bottles. Like, let's not even talk about it. Just hand me 2 bottles because it's phenomenal.
To me, you definitely get more of those oaky characters to it. It almost tastes like a little like cedar woodish to me.
Yeah, I think so.
But then there's like this little bit of like cherry, like black cherry kind of character coming through. There's more of these fruits going on. It loses a little bit of like what I would call the leathery note of the 2019. But it's just a much more dynamic whiskey in the glass to me. And, you know, I think you're right. I think it shows that in 2 years, their progression as blenders, as their barrels, they also have more choice of what to pick from.
And you start to understand like where in your rick house your premium barrels are coming from, right? And so I think the whole process of it and really the science of it becomes a little bit more dialed in the further you go. And I was talking to Josie a little bit about the blending process, and you know, he has these little ones tucked away that he just really likes, and he'll put, you know, just a little bit of it. Like he might have one that's like a 10-year or something like that he feels just adds a really unique quality. And in this whole blend, he might only put 750 mils in it, but it makes a difference, right, on the palate and on the profile. And so I think that's what I really like about it. It's that just like super specific approach to blending. And that's what craft distilleries can do. They can just sit there and they can play.
Yeah.
And they can come up with something that, you know, even if you put a small amount in, it completely changes the profile of it. And I fell in love with the 2021 right away. I'm super excited to see what they do for the 2022.
Yep. And, you know, I appreciate immensely, James, that you have vowed to give me this bottle as a gift.
Oh, is that?
To your co-host.
Yeah, I think we were gonna swap that for one of the Balvenie tons. I
don't know about that.
I think that's what we're gonna do. This is a good point, though. This is a good point now that you mentioned that, to bring a price point on this.
Yeah, we haven't talked about price.
No. So the Patton Road is normally,
that's the first one.
Yeah, I think that's about $80.
Okay.
And I remember when I first started to buy it, I was like, well, you know, that's quite a bit.
So it's a little high for a 5-year-old craft product, but
it is. But
it's a good craft product.
Yeah, in terms of craft products, I think it's exceptional. It's cask strength. It's different. It's unique. It's a 4-grain product. So I think there's enough there to certainly warrant that. The anniversary blends you're paying premium for because they're just very limited. Like I said, this year's was only 1,500 bottles.
Like 120?
120, 130 range.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. And I think they're both, in my opinion, they're both worth it, maybe for different reasons. But I've never regretted paying that much for it. And it's one of those, you know, when, you know, David would come over, when you come over, or, you know, when Andrew would come over and I wanted him to try something different, these are the bottles that I would pull out.
Thank you guys for listening. This has been another episode of Whiskey Uncut. I was Paul. He was James.
I think I'm still James, but we'll go with it.
You ever listen to, I can't remember what comedian it was, but he had a stand-up routine where he's like, you know how like you go into a department store and, you know, the person coming to ask you, like, if you need help, they're always like, and if you need anything, I was Tiffany. It's like, well, what if I don't need anything? Who are you? You know,
who did you become in the meantime?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, thanks for listening, guys. This has been fun. Until next time, drink more whiskey and cheers.
Cheers.